I would propose that we open the discussion immediately to the plenum and ask for questions to both of your lectures. But of course, I don't want to stop both of you to addressing first probably questions to one another and start the discussion with that.
Any questions left? I could ask you, what do you think about the work of art? You showed Paul McCarthy and others. Hasn't art the job, to say it very improperly, to serve us with counter images, to get rid of all these media and press images which doesn't explain anything, and so in return the art uses these images as did it Paul McCarthy or other artists, or maybe what did you show? For me, it's the main
Well,
idea.
Jacques Rancière has argued, I think, persuasively that one of the major tasks of art is to produce a critique of images, to deliver images from their merely imaginal quality into something that invites or allows a certain critical contemplation. Yeah, I agree. I think that is a fundamental task of art, and that was really a basic point of my presentation. But I'm not sure if I were going to ask you a question, it would be about the. Do you have an account of why the Obama administration chose this particular photograph? Hillary Clinton denies that this was an emotional gesture. She says she had a cold. Very firm about that. And yet it's unavoidable, as you pointed out. The image takes away the subject's intentions, whether she's telling the truth or not. And of course, we echoed that in my family Christmas card. My wife and daughter dutifully covered their mouths in alarm, and my son and I looked manfully forward. The other question I would ask you about the image, and maybe the audience would want to comment on this too, is why they picked one out of all of the available ones that made Obama look so small.
To make him big. And to make him less responsible as he was, of course. The general, which the name Webb, he's called Webb and doing things on the website or in the web. He's in this very moment the chief of the.
But if you looked at American family photos of Sunday afternoon gatherings to watch a sports event, Obama occupies the position of the kid brother on the sofa. The little kid, and his vice president is much bigger and firmer. And I mean, I don't want to overinterpret the image, but in a way, this was Obama's greatest risk. His own, everyone in that room told him not to do it. Biden most of all. They all said, it's too risky. The best estimate is maybe less than a 50-50 chance. And if it had failed, it probably would have doomed his presidency right there. So this is the moment when, I mean, I see him as shrunken into himself. And also, it's the moment when Obama really signed on without reservation to what is now current policy, that the US government can assassinate anyone in the world, including US citizens, without trial, without any kind of reservation. So there's a moral diminution to the presidency in this moment. Same thing happened to Jack Kennedy, who famously was running a Murder Incorporated out of Florida. a Murder Incorporated, which came back to haunt him with his own assassination. But I don't know, maybe we should hear from the audience.
Mm-hmm. Are there any questions? Please.
Yes, Maria.
Hi, my name is Maria Halaweva. Thank you for wonderful presentations. I have a question that's very banal, but sometimes very banal questions, very simple questions need to be posed. And that's, how do you use the term counter-image? Why the images, specifically you, Mr. Mitchell, why the images you presented that refer in one way or another to a source, a media outlet, are not seen just to be other images? Why are they counter-images? Where's the dialectics? And what does it make it of these counter-images? Is it a derivative of a master image that appeared somewhere in the media? Where does this counter-narrative come from?
Well, it would be many ways of depicting the counter, the Gegen in the image. As I suggested, sometimes an image is against itself, that there's something in it that is contrary to either its intention or to its composition. But also, it's the juxtaposition of images. I mean, every art historian knows that the method of art history, dictated by the slide lecture, was to always have an image and a comparative image, which was treated either as a contrast or an adjacency or a similitude. So I think the counter has, as I said at the beginning, three variations. There's the image that comes out of a counter image, or that produces a counter image, or that is itself a counter image. But it isn't just one, there isn't just one relation of the counter. The againstness, I think, can take many forms.
I did use the counter image idea as a tribute to the exhibition, which is on show here. I didn't use it in my paper, but perhaps it helps us to see the relations between one and the other images. The Washington photo tries to let us think only about this, and we did it, and I went into the trap in a way of the Pizzuzza photo for looking so closely to it, and that is what, as a strategy, I think the US government press policy has intended. All the world is looking at this picture, this group photograph, and yes, the real image we are or part of the public is longing for isn't shown, and so it's a sort of Ablenkung, I don't know the English term. Distraction, yes, and a big strategy, and it has fulfilled so times with up to my lecture today.
Thank you. I've got a question as to the singular of image and images, because do you really think that it's only one image and a counter image, or do you believe in a network of images? Because we talked about juxtapositions of two or a group of pictures, but isn't it rather a real context and a network of pictures that create counter images, that we've got one maybe somewhere in this network and a real group of pictures that have got a past and a present then to this picture we are considered with?
Yes, I think that would be one of the essential relations of the counter. I think the idea of the singular and the multiple, the idea that, and that's to me the distinction between the picture as an embodied, incarnate, material thing that can be hung on a wall or projected at a specific place and time. As we have been showing pictures here, even though they are projections, they're here and now. They won't be here in another hour. The image is the thing that will be somewhere, that goes on, that is multiple. This is the way I'm thinking of the distinction between picture and image, or picture against image.
I would agree and say it's always a network of images, but in the case of the Situation Room photograph, once again, they tried to make an iconic image and tried to spread it all over the world, and yes, it did function. The next day, 2 days later, all the papers in the world, most of them, started with this image, so it was very successful.
There's also a different way that the singular and multiple can operate. One is by means of copying, the viral character of the image as opposed to the singular presence of a picture. And that's the way one image becomes the emblem of a whole archive. And that's would be my argument about the hooded man, that the hooded man has become metonymic, or a synecdoche for the entire 379 photos from Abu Ghraib that we know about, and also the more than 1,000 more that have not been released to the public. Those are not the same image, they're not duplicates. It's the images of piled up bodies and the whole kind of, especially the pornographic dimension of the Abu Ghraib photo archive.
Thank you very much for beautiful talks. I wanted to challenge Tom for a second on the statement and counter-statement he made in the beginning, and in relation to Michael's performance of the method. So I have two comments. One is, if I see the subject of this discussion here today, the issue is not so much the analysis, but how the images themselves develop a method. And I find that a beautiful way of saying that the critic and the image are in a dialogue of a sort of equality, and not, it's not the critic who only has the truth about the image. And that has been a little under-illuminated, perhaps. The other thing I wanted to insist on is that I was glad that you came up with a method. I was also very glad to see Michael do it, because the Feuerabend, resistance against method, was primarily against the justification of the discovery beforehand through a method, and the objective illusion that came from that. But if you reject method altogether, which you didn't do, thank heavens, you would lose the other meaning of meaningfulness of method, which is the teachability. And I think that many of us are in the business of teaching, or of, in some other way, by writing criticism, of communicating to a larger public what you can do with images and how you can become literate, visually literate. And I think that is why method as an idea has to be salvaged. It's the source and the only site of intersubjectivity.
Well, thank you, Mika. That's a terrific question. Of course, you detected what is the real method, beneath the method, which for me is to acknowledge what you might call the theoretical capacity, the self-theorizing capacity of images. The idea that the critic comes armed with a meta-language, with a set of preconceptions and notions that then can be applied, that's the version of method that I'm uneasy with. It produces what you might call theory readings that just generate predictable results. the method that I think you're asking me to illuminate further is one which I tried to lay out in a book called Picture Theory, which said pictures also theorize. They also reflect and produce secondary reflections on their own existence, on their producers, and on their spectators. As we've seen in Michael's wonderful presentation here, that choice of the Situation Room produced a meta picture, showing us something about the relation of sovereignty, politics, and violence that would be very difficult. 1,000 words would not be nearly enough, and clearly that image has generated, a wonderful set of counter images and spin-offs and clones. And you're right, teachability. I'm not totally against method. I'm just against what I call the foolproof method, the one that requires the student to follow in the steps of the teacher and do the same thing. I think, especially for art historians, the thing is to bring us up to images, as you say, as equals to ourselves, and to encounter them, recognize them. I think that's part of the ethics of method. Not to think your method is key to mastery, but a key to going on.
Yes, the shape of this panel has changed a little bit, so the question of methodology went into the background a little bit. It was planned to have a discussion about methodology, but we both have been left in the end, and so we decided to change a little bit the shape and to present two papers. And I hope that our papers, my paper, has shown that I'm not without any method, but as an art historian, I'm interested in the history of the contemporary images too, and I always try to compare, not always, but sometimes I try to compare images of today with the image of history, and just to prove whether there are traditions. And the tradition which I tried to find out with the Rembrandt comparison, I only wanted to show that the quality of today's photograph is related to schemata which do come from the past, and it's only as much intense as it is, let's call it a qualified photograph, because it renders some issues of the past. And this is one method. On the other hand, I'm of course in the Warburgian tradition iconographer, and or it's a method on its own, but there was no time enough perhaps to make it explicitly enough before.
Yeah. And just as a footnote to that, I think it's clear that Michael and I are both followers of Warburg. Throwing lots of pictures against the wall and finding the constellation.
And our rhetoric is, of course, a sort of method too, and analyze our papers and you will see a lot of rhetoric methods.